Hey everyone, Mr. Weinland here. We are getting into chapter 16, section 1, Voyages of Discovery. As you can tell, my hair is starting to grow. Haven't had a haircut in a while, so when this whole thing is over, hopefully I can go get my hair cut. Woohoo! All right, we're going to talk about the age of exploration. We're going to jump into this time frame. And what we're going to learn about this time frame is understanding what Europe is trying to accomplish in the age of exploration. The thing is that Europe is really wanting to get to here and here. The problem is this area right here, the Middle East. As you can see, there's not a lot of land or waterways that can connect them to India. And you have the Black Sea. The Black Sea is probably one of the very few that can get them as close to India and China, but that's not enough. The Mediterranean can only go so far. So the idea is, how can we get from this part of Europe to this part of Asia? And we're going to learn that a lot of the European explorers are not aware of this, and that is the New World. And to us, it's not the New World. Now it's okay. It's North America. It's South America. But back then, that was the New World. The Old World was Europe, Asia, Africa. This is the Old World. This is the New World. And as they're trying to get across the Atlantic, thinking if we just go west, we're going to eventually end up here. They're going to learn that this is going to be a problem. So we're going to talk about that and kind of jump on it. Now, we talked about the Renaissance and what it did for the age of exploration. We briefly talked a little about it. What we did talk about the Renaissance is it brought a new sense of idea. What can we do with our brains? What can we do with our innovation? And we start to see that many individuals from the Renaissance are trying to learn more new things about the world, really have this sense of wonder, discovery, and innovation in Europe. And so we see that this is kind of what leads to the age of exploration. If you have number 7 on the form, number 7, how did the Renaissance contribute to the age of exploration? It's right here on number 7 in this first point. Spirit of discovery and innovation is going to lead to the age of exploration. We see that with the spirit, it's going to lead Europeans to want to test out some new technologies in navigation, and go sail in voyages of discovery. We see the periods during this time is known as the age of exploration. Some individuals are going to be driven for the idea of exploring, just wanting to find new places. However, a lot of them are ultimately driven by one thing and one thing only, and this is why it's number 1, wealth. That's right. Number 1, the age of exploration was driven in large part in search of what? Wealth. Wealth was the number 1 reason why these Europeans wanted to go out and search for this new land or new route to Asia, is because they want to be famous. They desired expensive luxury goods. Some of these Europeans wanted to be wealthy. They wanted to show off their wealth by providing these goods. So the flow of goods by Italian merchants and others is ultimately going to allow them to charge high prices for these rare goods. And if they can kind of get a flow or can get more and more goods, yes, they can reduce the prices, but it also means that they're going to have more activity, which means it's going to bring in more money. But most of them were wanting wealth. So how are they going to attain this wealth? Well, a lot of them did it through trying to find new routes to Asia. And one of the ways to do that was to go and explore. A lot of the ideas were hey, can we just go west? Before they went sailing west, we see that a lot of this goal of wealth was not the only one. The idea, too, of sailing and going west or finding a new route was looking for fame and glory. Because here's the thing, if I can find the new route to Asia or India, that makes me someone that is desirable or wants to be talked to. I can use that experience to charge money for those who are wanting to sail to that part of the world. I can also use my name to sell goods and be successful. So we see this happens. The other ideas, some just want to be in the history books. If I'm the first to discover this, my name is going to be attached to it. So that is a big deal. The other aspect is just curiosity. Other explorers are just wanting to explore new lands just because they're curious. They want to know what's out there. So that's part of the idea with the Reformation, especially with new religions or new faith being thrown out there. The fact that new denominations are causing this spread and urgency to go out and share the faith of Christianity. That's part of the other motive of the curiosity, as well as to take on this challenge of going to other places to share the Christian faith. Now, Marco Polo is one of the very first in Europe to really explore the exotic lands. He is actually lived with the Mongols for a while in China, went with his father, was left there. Eventually, his father came back, picked them up. They were able to bring new goods and new experiences, and he wrote a book about it. Now, whatever the reasons for exploring by the Europeans, we do know that there are many ways these voyages were taken out, and a lot of them were basically achieved due to the advancements of technology. We see that without certain technology advancements, it might have been hard or impossible for some of these explorers to kind of go out and be successful. We see that a lot of things were borrowed by people, by the Europeans. Some of these things were borrowed by the Chinese, the Muslims who invented or came up with these ideas first. We do see that one of the biggest things that sailors needed in order to be successful was to navigate. How do we navigate from this destination to that destination? Well, one way to do that was the stars, calculating through the stars. One of the first things, though, was the compass that came brought to Europe from China. The sailors used that to figure out what direction they were going, north, south, east, west. We also see the astrolabe was invented by the Muslims. The astrolabe played a big part in that as well. This provided the introduction to navigate or chart the stars and the horizon. So the astrolabe was able to do that. That's your answer. Number 4, by the way, is the astrolabe. I've got it here in red next to number 4. So based on that, we see that the Muslims were able to allow the Europeans to plot the stars and figure out a map using the stars to figure out where to go. Because when you're at night, you can't really see the ocean. You can barely see the waves. You can barely see anything. And so the stars are exposed and they provide an outlet for these navigators. Also, what we start to see is that shipbuilding is a big part of the improvement in technology along with navigation. We see better ships are built, the road in a little bit lower into the water, not so high. And also, we see that this provided of them to carry a little bit heavier loads and withstand the waves. So the cargo, being able to carry more cargo, was a big deal. The caravel. The Caravel was also important into this. Very light, fast sailing ship. Two features made it highly maneuverable. Steered with the rudder at the stern. We see rather than with oars. We see also the lateen, a triangular sail, could be used to turn to catch the wind from any direction. We start to see new sails. This is actually on sailboats today. The lateen is certain shaped sails are put on the ships to catch the wind at certain times for direction to carry it a certain way. So that is also helping. Figuring out how to use wind as a way, as their source of power, instead of using oars to kind of push themselves along. The caravel would also be equipped with weapons, including cannons. We see ships could face off against each other in hostility. This also is the beginning of naval battle, with the cannons now attached to the ships. We also see more maneuverable defense mechanisms or defensive strategy. With the caravel, we're able to move the ship around a little bit to help defend ourselves from attack. This is being provided as well. Now, let's go into a little bit of the first countries to start off the Age of Exploration. It's going to be mostly Portugal and Spain who kick things off. Your answer number 2 is Portugal. The first country to launch a large-scale voyage of exploration was who? Portugal. They were the ones to want to go out and search, thanks to the efforts of Prince Henry, son of King John I of Portugal. He is often called Henry the Navigator, not himself an explorer, but he was the one who helped fund and send out many explorers to go and explore and find new lands for Portugal. Because here's the thing: if you're Portugal, if you find new land with new resources, that's only going to help your country become more wealthy, to then invest in other businesses and then ultimately help other individuals who are trying to be successful. It's only going to make your country grow and be better. And so we see that Henry does this in the early 1400s, where he kind of creates a navigation court which allows sailors, map makers, astronomers together to figure out ways to get to these locations in a much rapid pace. And so we see more expeditions are set out west to the islands in the Atlantic, and then we start seeing down into Africa, or I should go into Africa. The Portuguese settled Azores, Madeira Islands, learned more about the African coasts. We see that a water route to India was ultimately their main attempt, is trying to get to India. So Prince Henry's ultimate goal was to find a water route around Africa. Or is it this way? Yeah. Or beep. There we go. Anyway, around Africa to India. So your answer to number 5, the ultimate goal of the early Portuguese explorers was what? It's right there. Find a water route around Africa to India. That was the goal. Get to India, get to China. That's where the goods are. So we see that Prince Henry is died before his goal is accomplished, but he ultimately, his goal was not abandoned after his death. We do see in 1488, Bartolomeu Diaz became the first to sail around the southern tip of Africa. We see more are going to explore. In 1497, Vasco da Gama set out for India as well, stopped at several African ports in his time. We see that he was successful, learned Muslim merchants actively involved in trade. Journey took more than 10 months, but eventually reached the Calicut in India. We see also lucrative trade with Da Gama. The trip inspired more others to go out and find India, led to Pedro Cabral. So we see that he is also able to be successful, sailed west, sided, claimed land became known as Brazil. So he ends up finding South America. Portugal established the trading centers, rich, powerful European nation. This ultimately opens up the door for Spain. Spain is wanting and seeking new routes. They're seeing Portugal having success. Spain is obviously come into new money after destroying the Moors. They are growing as a nation. They have a lot more power. They want to show their money and power. And in order to do this, they need to go out and then be a part of the Age of Exploration. So what do? They luckily, we see that King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, who are now the new rulers of Spain, are interested in the idea of sailing, get an Italian man named Christopher Columbus in 1492 to come visit them. And basically what Christopher Columbus says is, look, I believe if I can go sail west, or actually west, then I will be successful in finding India and China. So obviously Columbus is wrong. Columbus thinks that, this is only going to take at most like 4,000 miles to get to where I need to go. What he doesn't understand is that it is going to be more than 12,000 miles to get to where he wants to go, and that is to get to China. So he also doesn't calculate that North America is there. It doesn't matter. The thing is that he does convince the Spanish that he can sail west and find China and India, not knowing that the Americas are there. So Columbus sets out. He is sailing with 3 different ships, and we see that he will eventually reach the Caribbean after 2 months at sea. He thought he had reached Asian islands and actually thought he landed in India. So when he saw the Native American or the natives, he called them Indians. He didn't know. He thought he was in India. So he does return back to Spain in 1493, returning with some exotic islands. Even though he did not reach India, in his mind he thought he did, but he didn't. He does bring back parrots, jewels, gold, plants unknown to Europe. So he did bring some useful information. Spanish believed that Columbus found this new route to Asia and hailed him as a hero. Now, we're going to find out that he wasn't quite the hero we all know him to be. Columbus would then sail out 3 more voyages to the Americas, still believing that he reached Asia. The error was not found out until 1502. About that time, he is eventually going to pass away. We see that explorer Amerigo Vespucci sailed the coast of South America, concluded it was not Asia, and map makers later made the change, calling it America in honor of Amerigo Vespucci. People forget about that. That's where America comes from. The name America comes from Amerigo Vespucci. Knowing that they had found new land, Spanish set out to explore it. In 1513, Nunez Balboa led an expedition across the Isthmus of Panama, and then after more than 3 weeks of travel, Balboa became the first European to see the Pacific Ocean. We're going to quickly move through some of these. We're going to go talk about Ferdinand Magellan. What did Ferdinand Magellan do? After Balboa's discovery, the Spanish realized they needed to cross another ocean to reach Asia. So Magellan thinks, hey, I'm going to sail around the world. So they didn't know how large the ocean was. They just kind of think, oh, you know, we kind of found this new way, and now we're going to go around and blah, 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 blah. We'll get there. But Magellan goes and sails out in 1519. And we see that he sails out with 5 ships, 250 men. We do see that this is a huge voyage. It's very long, very difficult. Some of the men mutinied. That means that they wanted to give up. They kind of overthrew the ship or rebelled. Magellan is then killed in a fight with the Philippine natives. However, his men still sail on and finish out the whole trip. In 1522, 18 survivors of the original fleet arrived back in Spain, and this is the first circumnavigate world. So meaning that they have gone all around the world. So they successfully went around the world and calculated their trip. And so we do see that ultimately that they had to come all the way down here. And this is Magellan's line. Magellan is right here and mostly started in this part of Spain. It comes all the way down to South Africa, then comes over here, or South America, sorry, not South Africa. South America, and then kind of sails across the Pacific, hits the Philippines. This is where Magellan dies, but then they finish it out and head back to Spain. So we see that a lot of explorers had some success. We do see that mostly this is where Columbus ended up. He did not reach India, but this is where he mostly ended up and would come back and discover the Dominican and I think parts of Costa Rica as well in this region of the world. Most of the France is going to discover this aspect, which we're going to talk about in England, mostly here. We do see some English, like Sir Francis Drake, did go around the world as well, which we're going to talk about. So let's go ahead and talk more explorers. So Spanish Portuguese did not remain alone in trying to go and find these routes. We see the English and the French in the 1500s, as well as the Dutch go on explorations. Start with the English in 1497. That's when they first launched their big discovery, or at least tried to. John Cabot sailed to the Atlantic coast of what is now Canada, tried to repeat the voyage, fleet vanished, presumably sunk. We do see that the English soon realized that they had reached an unknown land and not Asia. And so we see the Queen Elizabeth II, sent Sir Francis Drake out. And after the stop in what is now California, Drake sailed north to seek a route around North America. So your answer to number 3, Sir Francis Drake found a route around from what to what? North America to the Atlantic. So North America to the Atlantic is your answer number 3 right there with Drake. So the weather was too cold. He ended up heading west around the world to get back to England. He became the second person to sail around the world, as Sir Francis Drake was just trying to, find the fastest route and accidentally went around the world. So there you go. Also, we see England wanted to find a shorter route to Asia. Magellan found. So we see that they sent a Dutch-born sailor, Henry Hudson, to go and find this route. We do see that in 1607, he set out north, hoping to find the Northwest Passage. Actually, he did not find that. He only found ice, returned to England, later made 2 more voyages for England and the Dutch. We see for the French, also, they wanted to find a faster route to Asia. This is your answer to number 6, by the way. So number 6, the ultimate goal of early English, Dutch, and French explorers was to what? Find a passage to Asia, as it's right here. Find a passage to Asia. So we see the French sent explorers to the Northwest Passage, couldn't find it, but they kind of really settle around Canada and really make a name for themselves around there, working with the Native Americans there, the natives, and trying to find goods, mostly furs. In 1534, Jacques Cartier sailed past Newfoundland into St. Lawrence River. He claimed the land, the province of New France, which is now Canada. Now, Henry Hudson, getting back to him, when he sailed with the Dutch, he does return to North America. And by 1600, sailing for the Netherlands, he ultimately as a powerful trading nation, they hoped to find new products, trading partners. So in 1609, Henry Hudson set out back for the Northwest Passage. He did not find the passage. He actually ultimately discovers a river and is now named after him, and that is the Hudson River, which is also in New York. So we do see that the Dutch, the Netherlands, do discover what is now New York and New York City. So Henry Hudson, or the Hudson River, is named after him, which Sullenberger, who basically had that plane that landed in the Hudson River, he landed in that river that is named after Henry Hudson. So there you go. Some little fun facts there. All right, well, that's going to do it for section 1 of the Age of Exploration. We're still pretty early on this process. The next section that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the goals of exploring. As more and more of these countries find these new lands, what do they plan to do? We're going to learn that a lot of it has to do with the resources, but another big part of that is conquering, and they're going to conquer the land. So we're going to talk more about that. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at winelandp@manford.k12.ok.us. See you guys. Be safe. Enjoy.